Hello. Today we'll talk about a very interesting French architect, Jean Renaudie, born in 1925 and died in 1981. So he only lived for 56 years. Not enough for anyone and not enough for an architect. So Jean Renaudie, born on the 8th of June, 1925, was a French architect and town planner. This was the man, an interesting, intense man with a very original vision about architecture. And actually, he is here pictured with a model of an urban development that he built, and the peculiar window that you see is part of a building that he built. He built mainly near Paris and near Lyon. And we are going to see his very unusual urbanism. Jean Renaudie. So let's read a little bit about him. Jean Renaudie joined the École Nationale Supérieure des Beaux-Arts in 1945, studying in the studios of Auguste Perret and then Marcel Lotz. Then he gained his architecture diploma and worked for l'Atelier de Montrouge with Pierre Riboulet, Gérard Tourneur, and Jean-Louis Verret, whom he met in 1956. He did some interesting works in this atelier. We are going to see just one work by them, by Atelier de Montrouge. He practiced a form of architecture that, due to its starkness and the simplicity of its plastic effects, is described as brutalist. He is true, he worked a lot with concrete. His studio stood out whether with a crash in Montrouge or with the Vincennes Stadium contest from 1963. He split with the other members of the Atelier de Montrouge in 1968. In addition to the disagreements about the events of May 1968, they clashed on the planning of the new town Val de Reuil. Renaudie would have liked to put the town on the cliff overlooking the flat, wet site intended at the beginning. He thus created his own agency in Ivry-sur-Seine, where he built a lot of these unusual houses, if we are to call them so, from 1971 to 1975, and from 1976 to 1980, he participated in two phases of the renovation of the center of Ivry in collaboration with René Gaillustet. One of his projects, the Jean Hachette Shopping Center, gave him international recognition. From 1974, he worked on the renovation of the center of old Givors, creating the City of Stars, Cité des Étoiles. Between 1976 and 1981, he participated in the it kills me, Zoom. I can't read, but you can read it. The third line. It's covered here by a line which is shortening my life, but you can read it. But I can read afterwards. He won the Grand Prix National d'Architecture from the French Minister of Culture for the sum of his works. The main focus of his work was on social housing and urban planning. He had been one of the first opponents of the construction methods of the major housing estates, Grand Ensemble, and the first new towns in the 1950s and 1960s. He never wished to systematize architecture, creating a wide variety and diversity of apartments in his housing projects. One of his major achievements is found in Givors, and we are going to see it at the foot of the ruined chateau. These blocks of social housing, again, social housing, meaning inexpensive housing, on the side of a hill have a very special architecture which seeks to optimize the views and orientations of the houses. Drawings by this remarkable architect, Jean Renaudie. He was also, a visionary, if we are to use this word. Often this word is used to describe what is difficult to understand or even to implement, but I use the word in a positive way. He had visions, and they can be seen even graphically in his studies, in his sketches. He actually built in this way, and we are going to see plenty of such projects for social housing. Many people think that you cannot innovate in social housing, that there isn't money there. It's not true. He innovated a lot, and he is not the only one, actually. But you see from his spirited drawings that here is a vigorous artist, a vigorous architect who is not afraid to break the rules and break the box. And bravo to him. Jean Renaudie, enjoying doing architecture. It's all about this, enjoying doing architecture. And you cannot have this joy unless you are creative. And he was. And this is not an abstract graphic work. These are studies for plans for a large housing complex, which he actually built. So is it possible to be temperamental as an architect? Yes, it is possible, and I would say it's even desirable. Express your feelings, express your emotions. Don't be afraid of the artist in you. The artist will save your soul. Now, this crash in Montrouge, he was part of the team that built it, but it was a little bit difficult. It's a little bit difficult to find his works because of the naming. I think this is the work, but he was not the leader of the group. He was just a young architect employed in this office. And I think he worked for this, building for children. But his work, you'll see later on when he became independent. I like very much this picture that was taken inside this building with all these children. You see their heads. They are not taller than the parapet of the stair. Very nice picture inside this building. I'm a little bit confused because this was actually described as a library for children. But on Wikipedia, I found the word crash, which means something else, still for the children. Anyway, here again, he was not the author of the building, but was part of the team that worked in that office. And I read about it a little bit earlier. Now, this fire station, I don't know if I have pictures of it. No, I don't. As I said, it's a little bit difficult to find works. To find pictures of his works, with the exception of those near Paris, Ivry-sur-Seine, and near Lyon. For this one, I only found this picture, and here I see it's a village for tourists, and I think it's impressive. And it's probably inspired by the well-known buildings by Le Corbusier near Paris. We see the meeting between concrete work and wooden work, wood and concrete, and I think this mixture, wood and concrete, softens a little bit the potential harshness of the concrete, aesthetically speaking. This is a school that he built in 1970, École des Plans. It's here. With little pavilions, the spirit of the late 60s, the beginning of the 70s. He's most famous for the housing complexes that he built, and we are going to see plenty of pictures of those incredible achievements, not just in terms of architecture, but also in terms of what we call urbanism. Jean Renaudie, a school. Playful, but I think it's quite acceptable now, even to be encouraged to create a playful building for children, regardless of their age. I am horrified by buildings that are crushingly authoritarian towards the young. A school should never be authoritarian. No. And here we see, even in terms of colors, he was ludically inclined and playful. An initial sketch. Here are the buildings. And sorry about the the foggy picture, was probably taken from a magazine. Now we arrive at his housing works. They are strangely named Operación Daniel Casanova. Most of them are like this, and I don't know what that means, Operación Daniel Casanova, in Ivry-sur-Seine, with 80 houses, but they are not, they are houses, they are also apartments, some shops and offices. He worked with René Gayuste. And this picture is as it is in black and white, but we arrive also, will arrive at some, colored pictures. Now look at this, so when was this built? In 1970, 1972. Half a century ago, he anticipated actually the climbing of our concrete buildings with green, with plants. And in my opinion, he did it with much more verve, energy, and freedom than some of the very celebrated architects of today. Because there are architects from Big, Bjarke Ingels and MVRDV who also, flirt with the mountain, with a mound of buildings. But I think Jean Renaudie did it more forcefully and freely. Look at this. It could be disorienting. And even myself, I got a little bit tired looking at too many houses, if we are to call them so, done in the same manner. But in a way, it's the medievalization of architecture, the medievalization of modernity. And this is a process which I find very interesting. It is a little bit neurotical, but I think the variety of spaces is amazing. I mean, just compare with regular blocks of flats. Here, each house has a triangular garden, and it has its own individuality. But yes, it could be a little bit tiring because it has freedom, but there is a system here too. It's almost like in Hamlet. It was there was a system in his madness. And I don't want to accuse these architectural works, which I admire, as being mad, but there is a level of madness, and I love the labyrinth, and I love even disorder. But here there is maybe if they were built in time for various people and with other materials, not just concrete, would have been better. But here we have a mono material, which is concrete. Fortunately, it is accompanied by a lot of green plants. This is a great thing. I like the fact this ornamentation of urbanism, where the urban scheme becomes almost a tapestry or a rug, so to speak. Well, the rug or the tapestry is not so obvious in a black and white picture from above, but when we look at the colored pictures, things, perceptions change. Here is, a study for an apartment, for a house. I know that there are architects and professors who claim that you cannot furnish a room which doesn't have parallel walls. Well, I'm not sure it is quite like this. I mean, here it is a house which has obviously a lot of circumstances where, there are all kinds of angles. Why not? and it was built. I mean, they were built because it's not just one, but many. Here is the, you know, the working drawing of the same apartment. A very original interpretation of the program housing, and it took a lot of courage to build something like this. What I like about this is that there is unity, but there is also multiplicity. So there is verity and unity, multiplicity and unity. And towards the street, you know, the facade is more regular, it's still in steps, but it's more regular. But there are other views which are, you know, extremely organic, if we are to call it so, and yet based on a strict geometry of triangles. I actually think that the diagonal can be very stimulating. There is no reason to, you know, reject a work which employs diagonals, because a diagonal is usually a dynamic architectural choice or architectural element. Now, how he managed to bring together all these units, housing units, without high technology, without computers and so on, is incredible. I mean, just to resolve the circulations, the access to the apartments is a challenge in itself. Look at this. How did he control it? So again, nowadays, there are architects who make proposals kind of in this spirit, as you know, the hill, the mound, the mountain. But half a century ago, you know, it was less common. Yes, there were approximations of this in Montreal Habitat 1967. Here is still something different because it's within the fabric of an existing city. It's not part of an exhibition. It's built for, you know, real people with real needs in a manner which was, you know, in total contradiction with what you see, you know, in the background there. You know, just blocks of flats, prisms, regular prisms with apartments. And here we have this, you know, geometrical, neurotical, a little bit mountains, architectonic mountains. Operation Jean Hachette, also in Ivry-sur-Seine, with 40 houses, shops, offices, and cinema, in collaboration with the same architect. Not all pictures are great, but you can still have a, an idea about how he built all these, labyrinthical housing complexes. Operation Jean-Baptiste Clément, also Ivry-sur-Seine, near Paris, 10 houses and shops in collaboration with the same architect, 1973, 1975. So again, these are not expensive housing units. They are most of them social housing. And yet it shows that you can do interesting, creative architecture for those who are underprivileged. It's possible. Renovation of old Givors. This is near Lyon from 1974. So he mainly built a lot of houses. You see here, there are 270 such houses, shops, library, creche, theater, and police station from 1974. So he built mainly in two locations, near Paris, Ivry-sur-Seine, and Givors, near Lyon. Cité des Étoiles, 1974. This is what Leopold Lambert said, an interesting thinker and theoretician. Leopold Lambert, maybe he would have disliked to be called a theoretician, kind of a rebel in the field of architectural thinking, a non-conventional thinker about architecture, but he's right about Jean Renaudie. He says, in my opinion, Jean Renaudie is one of the very best French architects of the last 50 years. His two housing complexes in Ivry-sur-Seine near Paris and in Givors near Lyon are two very successful examples of architecture becoming urban in an era, 50s and 60s, that created what is now famous as the French suburbs catastrophe. In fact, those two housing complexes are extremely interesting in the fact that they embody a real urban density, mix several social levels, organize urban life on a multitude of stories, blur the limits between private and public areas, and supply a little piece of garden for every apartment. This architecture is full of episodes, surprising moments of beauty in an urban artifact or landscape full of hideaways, Leopold Lambert. And here it is. As I said, it's the medievalization of modernity. And this is an extremely courageous attempt, and in my opinion, very inspiring. I mean, you know, most professors in schools of urbanism would dismiss such a work because this is in contradiction with the rigidities and the dogmas of their approach to what they call urbanism. While surprisingly, many people, if not everybody, loves medieval towns. And yet we do not build like in the Middle Ages. But this man, assuming modernity and working with concrete and working with strict geometries, I mean, of triangles, he generated an architecture that, in my opinion, makes me think of, you know, medieval towns on the hill. Jean Renaudie. No, you can see he also worked with abandoned sometimes, like in this case, the triangle, but it's okay. He still created this kind of architecture that is it's like a conglomerate, you know, an aggregate of many fragments, of many parts that compose the whole. When the plants are missing, the effect is, you know, less poetical perhaps. But when there is an abundant vegetation, I think these complexes achieve their highest potential. Urban regeneration of the center of Saint Martin there is there also in this period, but the vegetation is less present. Another urban regeneration, 180 houses, I read, partially destroyed in 2009. I wonder why. I only have this picture, I think, yes. Sad, why would they be destroyed? They were built just 45 years ago, and they were destroyed in part in 2009. I couldn't find, I only found this picture, unfortunately. And then I think this is the last item or entry on this presentation. The Einstein School in Ivry-sur-Seine from 1979 to 1982. We saw the housing complexes in Ivry-sur-Seine, and the school, the Einstein School as it is called, it's not very dissimilar aesthetically. Thank you, and let's wish him happy birthday.